Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Back to Basics. We are here. We are excited and not at all totally and completely exhausted by a long, long week. I am still Pastor Don for my many sins, and joining me is Courtney.
Hello.
Again, those of you following on the podcast, man, you don't know what you're missing with all of her fun poses and facial expressions. It's great. You should totally watch us on YouTube.
And if I talk with my hands.
Yes, I know, it's fantastic. We're all very expressive in a visual way. And if you're watching on YouTube, just get it on the podcast too. Makes the numbers go up. It's fun. Anyway, today we have got something really interesting and exciting. It is the Bible. Oh my God, we're doing that. Oh wait, no, we do that every day. So never mind.
This is a Wendy's.
Yeah, I know. What if this was a Wendy's? I could have some French fries and I'd be happy. All right. So
I want a junior baconator.
There's exactly one Wendy's in the city here. Like within the entire city of Kobe, Japan, which is where I'm at for you, dear listener, who may not know. There's exactly one Wendy's. And I just recently found it and it made me very happy. Anyway, moving on to the actual Bible. We are going to be talking about Genesis chapter 25, verses 19 on to the end, which is verse 34. And we've got two little stories about young Essau and Jacob, who are brothers and who are going to be, spoiler alert, fighting with each other. As anybody who has children knows, that's pretty much all they do. So this should come as no surprise.
First, these recycled plot lines.
I know. All right. So we're going to go ahead and lean into that. We're going to chat about this and we're going to have some fun doing it. Particularly, by the way, dear listeners / viewers, you may notice Courtney and I getting very exhausted when we're talking about stories that involve children fighting and being ridiculous, because we are both parents and both have children that are both fighting and or being ridiculous 98% of the time. So this is very familiar territory for us.
Yeah.
So without any further ado, Courtney, would you like to take us away with the reading of the word of the Lord?
Why not? All right, let's tuck in. The birth and youth of Esau and Jacob. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Ben-Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle, so they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out, with his hand gripping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Okay. So are we going to talk about these per story?
Let's just go ahead and read through the whole thing. So let's just finish it out.
All right. Esau sells his birthright. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Therefore he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright.
Okay, so got some interesting stuff happening here. Now, I will admit, for those of you who are unsure about this, I am in fact male, so I can't speak to this with any authority. But I am pretty sure from being married to a woman who's given birth to 3 kids already, that when the Lord said to Rebecca, 2 nations are in your womb, she probably said something to the extent of, no shit, Sherlock, that's what it feels like.
I just got really kind of struck by verse 22. The children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is to be this way, why do I live? That just sounds like a really horrific pregnancy.
Yeah, it does not look like it was a fun one.
Just trying to imagine dealing, like I had an easy pregnancy, but dealing with a difficult pregnancy and like times before medicine, like
dealing with,
good Lord,
twins who are constantly not like most twins, which are just intertwined for the most part, like twins who are fist fighting each other in the womb in a time before there's even really painkillers so much. I mean, like basic herbal painkillers, but if I were Rebecca, I'd probably, not knowing which would hurt the baby and which wouldn't, stay away from those in those days. Like, yeah, that can't have been a good time. Like that, I'm sure that wasn't fun. It's interesting. Like there is a lack of clarity about at what point she realized there were 2 kids. Did you notice that?
Yeah. Like it makes it sound like, oh, surprise, these are twins, but
it's also referring to them as children even as early as verse 22.
Yeah. That's odd. I will say his body came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle. That didn't like strike me too much because like newborn babies are weird looking sometimes, and they got hair in weird places.
Any of you listening or watching who have not been present at a birth or had children, let me be the first to tell you, I've been present at the birth of all 3 of mine. They look friggin' weird when they come out.
Very first, mine was lavender. She's perfectly healthy, breathing fine and everything. She was lavender.
Yeah.
I'm like, she's purple.
Our first one came out, I mean, sort of like a pinkish purple, covered in crap, and looking for that was not a paraphrase, by the way. Looking for all the world like a scale model of her grandmother, wrinkles and all. It actually freaked my wife out. She's like, "Whoa, God, that's grandma."
That's adorable.
It was adorable. Thankfully, she turned out to look like a child eventually once we got her cleaned up and she got used to being in the air and all that. But like, yeah, newborn kids are freaking weird looking. However,
they're really
this
strange.
Does as we've been hanging
and
out,
some newborns are covered in a fine fuzz.
Yeah, oh, that is true. But like, as you can see here, I'm holding it upside down. I've got my handy dandy resource book nearby to keep me informed about things. And one of the things that is worth noting here, particularly the commentary by the Lord in verse 23 here, is generally thought to be later edition. And that is because Essau and his redness are meant to be specifically indicative of the country that they attribute to him, which is the country of Edom. Now, for those of you who don't know your ancient Middle Eastern geography, the country of Edom is no longer existent, obviously. It basically occupied the territory that is kind of the southeastern part of Israel and kind of the southwestern part of Jordan, bordering on the Gulf area there. So it's kind of like that corner of each of those two modern countries, and a little bit of Egypt as well. And during the period, most of kind of the later periods here, Edom and Israel were competitive neighbors, would probably be a good way to put it. Not always at war, but not always not. Eventually, of course, Edom would pass into the mists of history, and Israel would grow and become its own thing. But at the time when this was written, and in the periods thereafter, like, attributing that shared kind of brotherly connection was an important part of those who were kind of putting this narrative together in the first place. And I'm going to read actually a section from here that highlights this as being different from relationships that we've had with other communities, like the Moabites or the Ammonites or other communities that we've encountered in the biblical narrative so far. And I want to read this because it's both accurate and hilarious to me. So the book here, How to Read the Bible by Kugel, describes this. A modern scholar would say that that is, the portrayal of Essau as kind of like a dumb jock relative to the more scheming, kind of intelligent, kind of cerebral Jacob, and that's going to come on later on as well. Like, he's talking about that portrayal. He says that a modern scholar would say that this is a reflection not merely of the political reality, but of a certain projection of national stereotypes, or would-be stereotypes, back to the time of their founders. Israel's Edomite neighbors are not dismissed, as the Ammonites and Moabites were, as a bunch of bastards. But neither is this portrait of Essau altogether flattering. He's just not very smart, and certainly no match for his cleverer, sometimes scheming younger brother Jacob. So everything here, from the redness of Essau, which is meant to linguistically be evocative of Edom in certain ways that would take far too long for me to get into. All of this is meant to kind of portray him as kind of like this dumb, athletic, militaristic kind of jock older brother, and Jacob as the younger brother who's kind of scheming, cerebral, and very, very sharp. That's kind of the stereotypical play up that's happening here, but it's done in almost a loving way, in a way that we don't get with like all of these other places where we've had, and a tribe shall come from these guys, and they are, as Kugel says, a bunch of bastards.
Yeah, I don't think this story paints either brother in like a really flattering light.
And that's something else. Like, Kugel again goes into more detail on that.
Like, it seems to be saying, Jacob randomly decided to, make a grab at his brother's birthright when he needed food.
Yeah.
Like, when he was like starving. Comes home, oh my God, you have food. Can I have some, please?
Yeah.
Like, I think that also depends somewhat on like how literal is that.
Yeah, and I think like
when he says when he talks about I'm famished or whatever, is he saying he says he's going to die? Is that to be considered literally? Like that he was literally
as a man with multiple sons, probably not. Like, I can't tell you how many times a day I get, I need to eat a cookie, I'm starving. I got it 4 times this morning while they were eating breakfast. Like, okay, all right, like that is a very common exaggeration to young men. That's normal. I
know, eat ever again.
I know, it's so bad. We should totally give you a cookie. No. So like that piece of it is normal. I think what I love here is that what you pointed out earlier, they're not painted as ideal. Neither of them is particularly, at this point at least, particularly good. Like, they're both kind of dicks in their own way, which, again, as anyone who's ever had more than one son can attest, is normal. Like, that kind of not being kind to each other is kind of how brothers are sometimes. And what we get through this as we get into the birthright stuff as well, is there is a lack of understanding of the severity of the crap they're fighting over. Like, sure, you can have some of my stew if you sell me your birthright. Like, birthrights are a big deal in ancient culture, and he's just treating that as like, yeah, okay. Like, I see this sort of stuff from my sons all the time. Like, oh yeah, I'll give you a bite of my cookie if you give me your favorite toy forever. Like the massive counterbalance and the other part of being like, yeah, sure, whatever. Particularly when it's the younger one doing the yeah, sure, whatever to something huge and major like that. That is totally a normal thing I see all the time with my kids.
See, and that's a whole new world, like window to a different world for me, because like I have one.
Mm-hmm.
I was an only child, so was my husband. So I have no like direct experience with siblings being that way.
Yeah, and I had 2 youngers myself, and I've got 3 kids, and let me tell you, it gets interesting sometimes. But yeah, so like, what is both unique and interesting to this passage to me is the normalcy of it. Like, you would expect that, like, Jacob is being established here as basically the root of Israel. Like, this is where the whole children of Israel come from, is from Jacob. He's where the line's extending. Esau is Edom, which is one of their great competitor nations in the time where this is being put on paper. You would expect a harsher treatment for Esau in the text and a kinder treatment for Jacob, and you get neither. And I think this is hugely important, or some people might say hugely important. And because that normalcy is important, like knowing that this is how people are, even the good people, even the bad people, they still just act like boys when they are boys. Like, we're not getting the whole I am the holy baby and I am going to be the head of Israel, and like the Jesus with the still doing the ancient sign of the cross from the manger type stuff. You don't get any of that here, and you shouldn't get any of that here. And I think that's stupidly important. They're not raising up heroes. That's my take on it, but of course you got me ranting.
No, that's super fascinating. It's just, I don't know. It just, I'm sure I know for a fact I've read this story before, because I as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. Mm-hmm. But it's just like, just the attitude, the bullshit coming from every direction in this story.
And I think I find verse 28 interesting, because I'm going to be weirdly culturally specific for a moment. But Isaac and Esau both give me you ever watch that 70s show?
No.
Oh man, you really should. That one really got with me. And they recently did that 90s show on Netflix, which I also watched. I gotta admit, really thoroughly enjoyed. And like the father in the 70s show is a guy by the name of Red, and he is your typical hard-ass 70s dad. Like, he wants, your kid to be a sports player and a strong, manly man and whatnot. And he's got a kid who is, by all accounts, wimpy as hell. Exactly the sort of kid I would have been. And what I get here is, like, Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game. Like, you get the impression of Isaac being a father very much in the model of his father. Like, Isaac is Abraham Mark II, which, spoiler alert, we're going to talk more about that next episode. And he leans so heavy on Esau because Esau is just like Isaac. He's fond of game. He loves to fight. He's strong. He's a man's man. And then you get Jacob, who's a quiet man living in tents, too frilly for rough sacking it on the field. He's a thinker, not a fighter type. And this harkens back to that 70s show archetype I was talking about, where the son is not at all like the father. And this is setting the ground for something really, really cool that I really, really like. Now, there is something to be said, and I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb here as a white Christian dude here, but there is something to be said for the idea that the understanding of Jacob as scheming and manipulative may be laying the groundwork for anti-Semitic tropes that are going to come down the line later.
I was wondering about that when you were talking about Jacob and Esau seemingly being talked about in ways that make it like it's like Scandinavia in the world, or whatever that one anime was where they just personify like this is this country and this is this country.
Yeah. Like there is, look, every terrible stereotype usually takes a facet of something and blows it out of proportion. What is meant here to be eminently positive, the mental acuity, the tactical thinking, and the wisdom, or not wisdom, but definitely intelligence of Jacob, lays the groundwork for what will later be positive tropes that are blown up into anti-Semitic, like condemnative tropes. But the seed of that is here, and I don't think it's meant to be negative in this case. Certainly when I describe it, and I want to be very, very clear about this, when I talk about Jacob as a schemer and a thinker, I'm not meaning it pejoratively in any way, shape, or form. That is how he's presented in the text, and
yeah, I was gonna say that seems kind of dickish in
he is
like the way the story's written.
And to be clear, your scholars and historians are presenting it the same way. But it is what is key to me in that presentation isn't just that he's a tactical thinker. He's way better at thinking through problems than his father ever was. Because again, spoiler alert, we're going to see Isaac repeating some of his father's playbook again later on, and it's going to be hilarious. But here we see it as God embracing something that modern American culture, modern Christianity doesn't, which is the sons of the Father being wildly different and being embraced for it. Like, it's not the son who is the same as the Father through whom God continues the lineage here. Like, the lineage of the people of Israel goes through Jacob, the one who's wildly different from his father, much favored by his mother rather than his father, for being entirely different in that way. Like, I, as a person, I'm very different from my father was. Like, my father was another one of those kind of masculine types, football player types. I played the clarinet, still do, love it, fun instrument.
I actually played the clarinet as well.
Hey, clarinetists rock, not gonna lie.
I know a lot of clarinetists, actually.
We tend to congregate. But my point is, like, that difference is something that in our culture, like, I caught a lot of shit growing up for that. Like, for being a thinker rather than a fighter, for being a big guy in a negative way rather than a muscly guy, for being someone who more was about emotion and intellect than who was about strength of arm and pushing your way through problems. That sort of shit got me in trouble. And that, you can imagine, like, as a son of Isaac, that Jacob's going to be getting some crap for that too. But that God chooses to uplift that is hugely important to me. And I think to a lot of us to realize too, because quietly what God's doing here is saying, no, the kids are the way to go about this. Like, the difference of the kids, their new opinions, their new approaches, their thoughts, they're going to have a different way of doing that. And that will only benefit you to make that part of your lineage rather than to try and suppress it. Because as parents, and I catch myself doing this from time to time too, we have an instinct to suppress difference in our children, to see them acting in ways that are different from what we understood, coming up with different solutions to problems. No, that's not how you do it. Like, that's not how you do it. I was making cookies with my daughter in a church event last week, and we're doing cookies and we're doing bread, and we're making bread, and everyone's trying different recipes. Like, this one's doing garlic. We had a whole group of people of us. This guy's doing a garlic-based bread. This one's doing a pepper-based bread. Oh, this one's doing a bunch of Italian herbs. You know what my daughter did? What would happen if I did more brown sugar and some cinnamon? And I'm like, but that wouldn't be a savory bread. And everyone's like, that'd be weird. I'm like, hold on. What you're talking about here is a sweet bread. And so by embracing that, she came up with this recipe for a cinnamon sugar kind of sweet bread with a brown sugar crust on it. And you know what? You know whose bread came out looking the best at the end of the night? We had half a dozen of us making different breads for the night. And hers was the one that came out the best. Like, hands down, by a wide margin, her loaf was the one that was the best. I cannot say enough of that. But if I had been headstrong set on like, no, that's not what we're doing, don't do that, it never would have happened. But that's exactly the sort of thing that God's trying to uplift in this passage. And I think that is magnificent. And it's often ignored in this. Like when I read this story, this birthright crap in 28 to 34 seems almost negligible to me. Because I'm like, yeah, that's just boys doing boy stuff. Like, come on. But the bit where, Isaac loves Esau because he's exactly the same as him, and Rebecca loves Jacob, and Jacob is totally different. That resonates with me. Anyway, you got me preaching again. Sorry. It's an occupational habit. I keep doing that. I did it all through my Bible study earlier today too, man. I keep doing that. It's almost like I should be.
It's all good. I'm genuinely kind of out of stuff to say about it. Like,
yeah, like
so by all means, if you've got material.
Well, no, like there's one last point that I think is worth making. Like this section here is talked about a lot. Like we had to have come back to Jacob and Essau like 5 or 6 times when I was in Sunday school. Like, I know these guys. I know about trading your birthright for lentil stew and all that. Like, it was talked about. Like this, I saw this one coming a mile away. Like, all right, Jacob and Essau, I've heard about this so many times. We get to like, there's nothing here. Like, it's not that big a deal. The only thing that's worth really mentioning in terms of the whole birthright exchange is that birthrights were a huge thing in the culture. Like, and this is meant to explain how Jacob gets like priority over Esau, who should have birthright as the firstborn. But like, okay, like this is the kind of bullshit that kids do all the time. It just really sucks for Esau that he kind of, tripped into this. I mean, by being the big dumb jock in that way. Like, yeah. So good on you, Jacob, for being a thinker, I guess. But like, this kind of exchange is not noteworthy to me as a parent. Like, of course they're going to do that sort of stuff. Like, where the hell were Isaac and Rebecca to make sure that didn't happen? But oh well, what's done is done, I guess. Crap.
It doesn't say how old they are. I had always kind of assumed that they were like grown.
Yeah, and it doesn't say. Like, I as a parent, I don't really make a differentiation as my kids get older. Like, yeah, you're still acting like my kids.
Yeah, but you don't have adult children yet.
Not yet, but I am an adult children with siblings, and I still fight with my sisters that way, to be honest. We still trip into that stuff. Like, it happens.
Fair enough.
We tend to default to understanding this as an adult children scenario because we have things like Jacob cooking and Esau coming in from the field, but they did that at a lot younger ages in those days. So there's real no way to know. So who knows? So yeah. Esau kicks off his birthright. Jacob's in charge, and is the youngest, oldest sibling in the history of Israel. Hooray! That's pretty much how it works. Anything else you wanted to dig into, or should we call it a short episode and just reward our listeners with something nice and terse and to the point?
I don't know. It's been terse. Just a lot of this is stuff that I might have an interesting take on, but it might be wildly incorrect because I don't know the cultural norms and I don't know what's like to have a sibling. And
I think we pretty much hit it. Like, this is what it is. I think we've pretty well covered it. So why don't we go ahead and call it here, because I know we're excited to get on to the next episode because it's going to be a fun one.
All right.
So for those of you who are staying through to the end, thanks for sticking around. As per usual, I want to invite you to join us on Discord, where our community is doing the thing and always is doing the thing. We're an online community. We have a physical location in Japan. So if you're here in Japan, we are doing more church stuff over the next coming months. Keep an eye out for that and come join us for things. But if you are not in Japan, we still have as much church presence online on our Discord server. It's kind of like our sanctuaries where our family gathers, and everybody is welcome to come join in there. So please, links to that are down below. The most important thing you can do if you want to help us out, though, is to do as the wise and generous Courtney has always said.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Yeah, the Holy Trinity.
No, I'm not going to cross myself and say like, share, and subscribe. That's got to be some kind of sacrilege.
Yeah, probably.
It would work though.
The more you like, share, subscribe, and comment if you want to get the bottom part of the cross in there too. That all, hey, it's pointing downward too, which really helps. Like that, this analogy is really working for me. But yeah, if you want to do all of those things, that's actually really helpful, particularly the sharing part. The more eyes we get in our videos to keep this series going, the better. Eventually, someday, we have hopes and dreams of monetizing this to help make our church grow. But at the very least, show some folk what we do and if you like it. In the meantime, I want to wish you all a blessed week. Pray for you. Tell you I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you. Take it easy. And we will see you in the next episode. Bye, y'all.
Bye.